A small stray puppy wandered into a police camp, completely unaware of the kind of place it had entered. The officers at the camp were members of a specialized SWAT team, trained for rapid response and high-intensity situations. It was no place for a tiny, lost pup, yet the little dog seemed completely unfazed by its surroundings. With its curious eyes and wagging tail, it trotted around, sniffing at the boots of officers and playfully nipping at their uniforms. At first, the officers were amused, but also perplexed. The puppy was clearly hungry and searching for food, but more than that, it seemed to be seeking attention and affection. Despite being an uninvited guest, it showed no fear of the uniformed men around it. Instead, it wagged its tail enthusiastically and licked the hands of those who reached out to touch it. One officer picked up the tiny pup, inspecting it closely. It appeared to be no more than 3 months old, a lively little creature with bright eyes and boundless energy. Though it was dirty and a little underfed, it was clear that the puppy had an affectionate personality. The officers speculated whether it had been abandoned or had simply lost its way. Realizing that the police camp was no place for a stray, the officers decided to take it outside and send it away. One of them gently carried the puppy to the camp's gate, setting it down on the other side. The pup, however, was reluctant to leave. It stared up at the officer with large, pleading eyes, its small body hesitating as if unsure what to do. As the officer turned back toward the camp, the puppy suddenly dashed forward and squeezed through the gate, scampering back into the compound as if it belonged there. Some officers laughed at its determination, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Once again, the officers tried to remove the puppy, but each time they placed it outside, it found its way back in. This continued for several minutes, and soon the officers were faced with an unexpected dilemma. What should they do with the persistent little dog? Some suggested calling animal services to have it taken to a shelter. Others, however, had already begun to grow attached to the tiny visitor. Before the officers could reach a decision, the puppy made the choice for them. Just as they were debating, it suddenly took off, chasing after another stray dog that had appeared nearby. The two ran off into the distance, and for a moment, it seemed as if the problem had solved itself. But the next day, during a police dog training session, the little pup returned. This time, it seemed even more determined than before. It sniffed around the training grounds, wagged its tail at the instructors, and refused to leave. The officers were both surprised and amused. It was as if the puppy had chosen this camp as its home. Would this small, persistent pup find a permanent place among the ranks of the police dogs? The officers weren't sure yet, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary stray. Despite multiple attempts to send the puppy away, it refused to leave. The little stray seemed to have made up its mind. It wanted to stay at the police camp. Every time an officer carried it outside and placed it beyond the camp's gate, the puppy would sit there for a moment, looking confused, then quickly scamper back inside as if nothing had happened. The officers, though initially firm in their decision to remove it, couldn't help but admire its persistence. By the third day, it became clear that the puppy had no intention of leaving. No matter what they did, it clung to the camp, following the officers wherever they went. When they marched in formation, it tried to run alongside them. When they sat down for a break, it curled up at their feet. When they were busy training police dogs, it watched attentively, wagging its tail as if trying to learn. The more they tried to ignore it, the more determined it became to be noticed. One of the officers bent down to examine the little pup more closely. It was still small, barely 3 months old, with a playful energy that seemed boundless. However, upon closer inspection, they noticed something concerning. The puppy's tail was slightly bald in patches. This raised some concerns about its health. Was it malnourished? Was it suffering from some sort of skin condition? Wanting to ensure the puppy was in good condition, the officers decided to give it a basic medical checkup. They noticed that apart from the bald patches on its tail, it seemed healthy. However, one of the officers suggested giving it deworming medicine, just to be safe. They also provided it with some food and water, and to their surprise, the little pup quickly gobbled up every bite, clearly starving. Seeing its intelligence and determination, one of the officers attempted a basic training session. He gave a simple command: sit. The puppy, to everyone's surprise, obeyed almost instantly. He then tried stay, and once again, the puppy followed the command, sitting still while wagging its tail excitedly. This was unusual. Most stray puppies were either too skittish or too wild to follow commands so quickly. It was clear that this pup was special. As the puppy continued to stay at the police camp, it quickly became a topic of conversation among the officers. Some were still skeptical, believing that a stray dog had no place in a high-security police camp. Others, however, had already grown fond of the little intruder. It had a way of making people smile, even in the midst of their tough, disciplined routines. In an effort to locate its rightful owner, the police reached out to local media outlets. They published posts and made announcements, hoping someone would come forward to claim the lost puppy. Soon, people from all over began arriving, each one hoping the little pup was theirs. One by one, they were shown the puppy, and one by one, they failed to recognize it. Some brought pictures of their missing pets, but none matched the puppy's appearance. It soon became clear that this was no lost pet. It was truly a stray. Now the question remained: what would happen to the puppy? Could it stay at the police camp? Some officers began to argue that the dog had already chosen them. It had shown an incredible will to stay, and more importantly, it had already started adapting to their training. Over the next few days, the puppy's behavior became even more remarkable. It was fearless, running right up to the large, highly trained police dogs and playfully engaging with them. The other dogs, though initially indifferent, soon began to accept the pup as part of their pack. It also learned quickly, imitating the behavior of the trained police dogs as if it, too, wanted to become one of them. Still, there were doubts. While the pup had enthusiasm, it was still young, inexperienced, and physically weaker than the full-grown police dogs. Could it really become one of them? Some officers thought it was just too small and playful to ever be a serious working dog. Others believed that with proper training, the pup could prove itself. As discussions continued, the little stray remained unaware of the debate about its fate. All it knew was that it had found a place where it felt safe, cared for, and, most importantly, wanted. It had no intention of leaving. Every morning, it eagerly joined the officers during roll call. During training exercises, it would sit on the sidelines, watching the older dogs and attempting to copy their movements. When the officers ate their meals, it would sit patiently beside them, its eyes full of anticipation. One evening, as the officers gathered for a break, one of them casually threw a small ball towards the pup. To everyone's surprise, the puppy immediately chased after it, caught it skillfully, and returned it to the officer. The group of men exchanged glances. This puppy wasn't just intelligent, it was showing natural instincts for retrieving, something that police dogs...
After days of debate, the officers had accepted that the little stray puppy was not going to leave. Its determination had impressed many of them, and its intelligence was undeniable. However, before they could make any final decisions about its future, they needed to be sure of one thing. Was this puppy truly a stray, or was it a lost pet, with an owner still searching for it? The police force decided to conduct an official search for the puppy's owner. They took photos of the little pup and posted them on social media, describing how it had wandered into their police camp and refused to leave. They also contacted local animal shelters and veterinary clinics, hoping that someone might recognize the puppy and claim it. The goal was simple: if the dog had an owner, it should be returned home. If not, they would have to figure out what to do next. Within hours of the announcement, the police station's phone lines were flooded with calls. People from all over the city reached out, each one claiming that the dog might be theirs. Some provided descriptions that matched the puppy's features, while others simply hoped that the little pup was their long-lost pet. Seeing the overwhelming response, the officers scheduled a day for people to come in and identify the puppy in person. On the designated day, a long line formed outside the station. One by one, people were brought inside to see the little pup. The officers watched as the dog reacted to each visitor, looking for any signs of recognition or excitement. If this puppy truly belonged to someone, it would likely show some sign of familiarity when seeing its rightful owner. The first visitor was a middle-aged man who had lost his puppy a few weeks earlier. He knelt down and called out a name, but the puppy only tilted its head in confusion. He tried to pet it, but the little dog remained indifferent. The man sighed in disappointment. It wasn't his. The next person was a young woman who had seen the post online. She was certain that this was her missing dog. She approached the puppy with excitement, calling out to it with the name she had given her lost pet. But once again, the puppy showed no reaction. It sniffed her hand politely but soon lost interest, turning back to one of the officers. One by one, hopeful owners stepped forward, only to leave with disappointment in their eyes. The puppy remained friendly, but never displayed any signs of familiarity. It became increasingly clear that this dog did not belong to anyone in the crowd. After hours of unsuccessful attempts, the officers concluded that the puppy was, in fact, a true stray. No one recognized it, and it recognized no one. There was no owner coming to take it home. With that realization, a new question arose. What would happen to the puppy now? Some officers still believed it should be sent to an animal shelter, where it could be put up for adoption. Others, however, argued that the puppy had already chosen them. It had been persistent, determined, and fearless. More than that, it had already begun to bond with the officers and had even started responding to basic training commands. During their discussions, the puppy continued to display behaviors that made it hard to ignore. It followed officers around the station, always eager to participate in whatever they were doing. It watched the older police dogs train and even attempted to mimic them. It seemed to understand that this was where it belonged. As more officers began to grow attached to the little pup, they decided to give it a trial period. Instead of sending it away immediately, they would keep it in the camp for a few more days and see how it adapted. If it showed promise, perhaps it could be trained like the other police dogs. Over the next few days, the puppy continued to impress everyone. It quickly learned routines and even started obeying simple commands given by the officers. It followed the senior police dogs everywhere, watching and learning. One morning, during a routine training session for the police dogs, the puppy made an unexpected move. The officers were practicing an obedience drill with their trained canines, having them sit and stay on command. The puppy, watching from the sidelines, suddenly ran forward and sat alongside the police dogs, as if it had been part of the group all along. The officers laughed, but they were also amazed. It was clear that this puppy was not an ordinary stray. It was intelligent, eager to learn, and fearless. Seeing this, one of the senior officers made a suggestion. Instead of treating the puppy as an outsider, why not officially train it as a police dog? At first, some of the team were hesitant. The puppy was still young, and it was much smaller than the trained Malinois and German Shepherds they usually worked with. Could it really be trained to the same level? But others believed it was worth a try. The puppy had already proven itself to be strong-willed and intelligent. It had no fear. Now that the little stray had officially been given a name, Bhawan, it was time to take the next step. If he was to become a real police dog, he needed to be in top physical condition. The officers had already noticed that Bhawan was small for his breed, but that wasn't their biggest concern. A more pressing issue had caught their attention: his extra dew claws on both of his hind legs. Unlike normal toes, these extra dew claws were not functional and could easily get caught on obstacles during training or real-life police work. This made them a serious liability. If Bhawan was to perform at his best, the dew claws would need to be removed through a simple surgical procedure. The officers consulted with a veterinarian who confirmed their suspicions. While Bhawan was otherwise healthy, the extra dew claws would be a problem if left untreated. The surgery was minor, but it was necessary if he was to undergo the rigorous training required of a police dog. Without hesitation, the officers scheduled the procedure. On day 18 of Bhawan's time at the police camp, he was taken to the veterinary clinic. The officers, who had grown attached to him, waited anxiously. Though the surgery was routine, they couldn't help but worry about their little companion. The procedure went smoothly. The vet removed the extra dew claws, cleaned the wounds, and stitched them up carefully. Bhawan was placed under observation for a few hours before being cleared to return to the police camp. However, his recovery process was far from over. For the next several days, Bhawan required careful monitoring. His bandages needed to be changed frequently, and he had to be kept from running or playing too roughly to avoid reopening his wounds. At first, Bhawan was restless. He had spent his short life running, playing, and following the police officers everywhere. Now he was being forced to stay still. But Bhawan's recovery wasn't just about his feet. During his medical examination, the vet had also discovered that he had developed a mild skin infection, possibly from his time as a stray. This required daily treatments and close monitoring to ensure it didn't worsen. The officers took turns caring for him, ensuring that his wounds were cleaned and his medication was given on time. Despite the restrictions, Bhawan's spirit remained unshaken. Every time an officer walked by, he wagged his tail, eager to be included in whatever was happening. Even when confined to a small resting area, he perked up whenever he heard the other police dogs being trained. He wanted to be out there with them. As the days passed, Bhawan's wounds began to heal. His stitches remained in place for a full week before the vet removed them. By then, he had already regained much of his usual energy, though the officers were still cautious about letting him engage in high-intensity activities. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A young woman arrived at the police station carrying another stray puppy. It was a small corgi mix, completely different from Bhawan in size and appearance. The woman explained that she had found the puppy wandering alone and wanted to make sure it was safe. She had heard about Bhawan's story and thought that maybe this little one could find a home as well. The officers agreed to take the corgi in temporarily, but they weren't sure how Bhawan would react. Up until now, Bhawan had been the only puppy in the camp, and he had grown accustomed to being the center of attention. Would he accept another dog in his space? At first, Bhawan was hesitant. He sniffed the new puppy cautiously, his ears perked up in curiosity. The corgi, on the other hand, was much more confident. It immediately approached Bhawan, wagging its tail and trying to play. However, the playful nature of the corgi seemed to annoy Bhawan at first. He wasn't used to sharing. For the first few days, the two constantly challenged each other. The corgi was bold and unafraid, often taking Bhawan's food or trying to claim his favorite spot near the officers. Bhawan, still recovering from his surgery, was frustrated, but never aggressive. The officers saw this as an opportunity for training. Instead of keeping the two puppies apart, they used their interactions as a lesson in socialization and discipline. Whenever a conflict arose, they guided the puppies with firm but gentle corrections. Over time, Bhawan and the corgi learned to respect each other's boundaries. One evening, after several days of tension, something changed. The officers watched as Bhawan and the corgi, who had been rivals just days before, curled up together, sleeping side by side. It was a small but significant moment. Bhawan had accepted the new puppy, proving once again that he was adaptable and willing to learn. As Bhawan's health improved, so did his behavior. The officers continued his basic training, helping him develop the discipline he would need for more advanced police work. Though he still had a long way to go,
With his surgery behind him and his health steadily improving, Bhawan was ready to begin his official training. Up until now, he had only observed the senior police dogs from the sidelines, watching them go through drills and practice routines. But now, it was his turn. The officers were eager to see if Bhawan, the stray who had stubbornly refused to leave their camp, could truly become a disciplined police dog. The first lessons: basic obedience. Bhawan's training began with the fundamentals, learning to follow basic commands such as sit, stay, and come. The officers were already aware of his intelligence. Even before formal training began, he had picked up on simple instructions just by watching the other dogs. But formal training was different. It required strict discipline, repetition, and patience. At first, Bhawan was energetic and eager, but he also struggled to stay focused. His curiosity often got the better of him. During drills, he would sometimes get distracted by birds flying overhead or the rustling of leaves in the wind. Unlike the older police dogs, who were laser-focused on their trainers, Bhawan was still easily excitable. To help him concentrate, the officers introduced him to reward-based training. Whenever he successfully followed a command, he was given a small treat or verbal praise. Over time, he began to associate obedience with rewards, and his focus improved significantly. The once distracted stray was now sitting still on command, waiting patiently for his next instruction. Overcoming his weaknesses. However, Bhawan had one major weakness. He had developed a habit of picking up food from the ground. This was a dangerous trait, as police dogs needed to be disciplined enough to ignore food that wasn't given to them by their handlers. In real-life operations, eating something from the ground could be a risk, especially if criminals attempted to poison police dogs. To correct this behavior, the officers set up a special training drill. They scattered food on the ground and commanded Bhawan to walk through without eating anything. Each time he attempted to grab food, they firmly said no and redirected his attention. It took multiple training sessions, but Bhawan eventually learned to resist temptation. Instead of going for the food, he looked up at his handler, waiting for permission. His progress was impressive, but the officers knew that training wasn't just about discipline. It was also about building Bhawan's physical and mental endurance. Physical training and coordination. Police dogs needed to be fast, strong, and agile. This meant that Bhawan had to undergo extensive physical training. Since he was still growing, his training started slowly to avoid injuries. The first major test was balance training. Many police operations required dogs to navigate narrow pathways, jump over obstacles, and move with precision. Bhawan was introduced to an elevated beam, where he had to learn to walk steadily without losing his balance. At first, he was hesitant. The moment he stepped onto the beam, he froze, unsure of how to proceed. The officers didn't rush him. They encouraged him with calm voices, allowing him to build confidence. After a few failed attempts, Bhawan finally made it across the beam. Though he stumbled at times, he never gave up. Over the next few days, he practiced tirelessly until he could walk across with ease. Next came speed and agility drills. The training field was set up with hurdles, tunnels, and weaving poles designed to test his reflexes. Unlike balance training, this was where Bhawan truly shined. He was fast, much faster than expected for a young dog. The officers were surprised at how naturally he navigated obstacles, almost as if he had been doing it his whole life. However, one challenge remained: his endurance. Bhawan had energy, but he needed to be trained to sustain it over long periods. To build his stamina, the officers gradually increased the duration of his training sessions. What started as short 5-minute drills soon extended to 10 minutes, then 15, then 30. Over time, Bhawan learned to control his bursts of energy and maintain his pace. Socialization with the other police dogs Bhawan had already proven that he could get along with other dogs when he befriended the stray corgi that was later reunited with its owner. However, working in a police unit required a different kind of teamwork. He needed to learn how to function as part of a trained K9 squad, following commands in sync with the other dogs. At first, integrating Bhawan into group training was difficult. The other police dogs were large, disciplined, and highly trained. Bhawan, on the other hand, was still learning. He was eager to keep up with them, but often made mistakes. During group patrol exercises, he sometimes broke formation, running ahead instead of staying in line. The older dogs would pause and look at him, as if silently correcting his behavior. The officers worked patia.
As Bhawan's training continued, he showed remarkable progress. His obedience had improved, his stamina was building, and he was slowly adapting to life as a police dog in training. However, his journey was not without setbacks. While his physical condition had strengthened, his medical recovery was still ongoing. A few days after his balance and coordination training, the officers noticed something unusual. One of his dew-claw wounds had not healed properly. It had become slightly inflamed, and Bhawan had been licking it frequently, which only worsened the irritation. Concerned about his health, the officers immediately took him back to the veterinary clinic for an evaluation. Medical challenges and unexpected setbacks. The veterinarian examined Bhawan's wound carefully and determined that while the healing process had been mostly successful, an infection had developed in the area where his extra dew claws had been removed. The vet prescribed a round of antibiotics and daily wound care to prevent the infection from spreading. In addition to the wound treatment, the vet also conducted a full health checkup. While Bhawan was generally in good shape, another issue was discovered: a mild skin infection on his back. It wasn't severe, but it required daily treatment and close monitoring. The officers, who had already become attached to Bhawan, took turns caring for him. They cleaned his wounds several times a day, applied medication, and ensured that he was getting the proper nutrients to speed up his recovery. During this time, Bhawan was kept from engaging in high-intensity training. However, resting was not something Bhawan enjoyed. Even though he was temporarily restricted from active training, he still tried to join the other dogs whenever he heard commands being given. The officers had to physically hold him back at times to prevent him from reopening his wound. Despite his temporary setback, Bhawan remained incredibly resilient. He didn't let the extra care and medical attention dampen his spirit. He continued to follow the officers around the camp, watching them intently, eager to return to training. A new companion and socialization training. During this period of recovery, something unexpected happened. Another stray dog arrived at the police camp. A young woman had found a small corgi mix wandering near the training ground and decided to bring it in, hoping it would find help. At first, Bhawan seemed unsure about the new arrival. He had already been through a short-lived friendship with the previous corgi, which had later been reunited with its owners. Now, another small dog had entered his space. This time, however, Bhawan was not as welcoming at first. The officers noticed that he was more territorial, especially since he had started viewing the police camp as his home. Whenever the new corgi tried to approach the officers for attention, Bhawan would step in between them, subtly showing his dominance. Recognizing the tension, the officers decided to turn this situation into a training opportunity. Police dogs needed to be social and adaptable, capable of working alongside other animals without showing aggression or possessiveness. To encourage positive interaction, they used a controlled introduction process. At first, Bhawan and the corgi were kept separate, only allowed to observe each other from a distance. Then, they were brought together in a neutral space where the officers carefully monitored their behavior. At first, Bhawan was standoffish, but over time, his curiosity won out. The corgi, who was naturally friendly and playful, wasn't intimidated by Bhawan's aloof behavior. Slowly, the two began to interact more comfortably. Within a few days, the officers started noticing a change in Bhawan's attitude. He no longer saw the corgi as an intruder, but rather as a companion. He even started sharing his food and playing with the smaller dog during breaks. This unexpected friendship helped reinforce Bhawan's social skills, proving that he could adapt to working with other animals, an essential trait for police dogs. Bhawan's first training mission. By the time Bhawan had recovered enough to resume training, the officers decided that it was time for his first field exercise. It wasn't a high-risk operation, but rather a controlled test to see how he would perform in a realistic police scenario. The test was designed as a patrol simulation. Bhawan, along with a few experienced police dogs, was sent to walk a designated path through the police training ground while being observed by officers. His task was simple: stay focused, follow commands, and observe his surroundings. At first, Bhawan performed exceptionally well. He stayed in formation, listening carefully to his handler's commands. However, about halfway through the exercise, something unexpected happened. A loud vehicle horn suddenly blared in the distance. For an experienced police dog, this would have been just another noise to ignore.
As Bhawan continued his journey in police training, his confidence grew. He had recovered from his surgery, improved his obedience, and was steadily mastering basic patrol skills. However, one of the biggest challenges still lay ahead: learning to integrate with the fully trained police dogs. Up until now, Bhawan had been treated as a trainee, slowly being introduced to more advanced exercises. But to truly become a part of the police force, he had to prove that he could function as a team player. The test of acceptance. Police dogs don't just work individually. They function as part of a highly coordinated unit, responding to commands with military-level precision. The officers had already seen Bhawan's intelligence and drive, but they needed to know if he could keep up with the senior dogs. The team decided to conduct a full unit training session where Bhawan would be included alongside the experienced dogs. This was an important moment, not only for Bhawan's training, but also for his acceptance into the pack. Dogs have a strong hierarchy, and a new recruit had to prove itself worthy before earning a place among them. At first, Bhawan was excited but slightly hesitant. The older dogs were bigger, stronger, and more disciplined than him. They moved in perfect sync, reacting instantly to their handlers' commands. When the training session began, Bhawan tried to match their pace, but he was slightly out of sync. His movements were not as precise, and at times he struggled to anticipate the next command. The senior dogs noticed his hesitation. In a working dog unit, there was no room for weakness. At one point, one of the largest police dogs, a German shepherd named Rex, gave Bhawan a low warning growl when he accidentally bumped into him during formation. It wasn't an attack, but rather a way of saying, "Follow the rules." Bhawan immediately understood. This was a test of discipline, and if he wanted to be part of the team, he needed to learn respect and control. Over the next few sessions, Bhawan worked tirelessly to perfect his timing and coordination. He practiced keeping his head level, watching the other dogs, and mirroring their movements. The more he trained, the better he became. Eventually, Rex and the other senior dogs began to accept him, recognizing that he was willing to learn and adapt. Facing a new challenge. The first patrol. Once Bhawan had shown he could work with the pack, the next challenge was his first real patrol mission. This wouldn't be a high-risk operation, but it was a serious test of his ability to apply everything he had learned in a real-world scenario. The mission was simple: a routine security sweep of a public area, ensuring there were no potential threats. Bhawan would accompany the fully trained police dogs, following their lead while staying alert to his surroundings. Before setting out, the officers made sure he was properly equipped. For the first time, Bhawan was fitted with a patrol harness, complete with a small badge that marked him as a trainee police dog. The moment the harness was secured, he stood tall, almost as if he understood the significance of the moment. As the team moved out, Bhawan walked alongside the experienced dogs, his eyes scanning the area just like he had been trained to do. At first, everything went smoothly. The area was quiet, and Bhawan followed the team's lead, remaining focused and disciplined. But then, something unexpected happened. A loud group of children suddenly ran past, shouting and laughing. It wasn't a dangerous situation, but for Bhawan, it was a distraction. He instinctively turned his head toward the noise, momentarily losing focus. One of the officers quickly gave a command. "Focus, Bhawan." Bhawan snapped back to attention, returning to his position. It was a small mistake, but in police work, even minor distractions could mean life or death. The officers noted his reaction carefully. While Bhawan had momentarily lost focus, he had quickly corrected himself when given a command. This showed that he was still learning, but also that he was capable of following orders under real-world pressure. The patrol continued without further issues. By the time they returned to camp, Bhawan had successfully completed his first official training mission, from trainee to trusted partner. After his first successful patrol, Bhawan's status in the camp began to change. He was no longer just the stray puppy who wouldn't leave. He was now a real police dog in training. The officers and other police dogs started treating him with more respect, recognizing that he had worked hard to earn his place. But there was still more to learn. Over the next several weeks, Bhawan's training was intensified. He was now being trained in real-world police procedures, including tracking scents, learning how to follow a suspect's trail based on scent, obstacle course drills, training to jump over barriers, crawl under obstacles, and move quickly.
A new name, a new identity. Bhawan was no longer just a stray who had wandered into a police camp. He had proven himself through his resilience, intelligence, and determination. The officers had watched him grow from an untrained, energetic puppy into a disciplined and capable trainee police dog. However, despite his progress, he was still missing one final thing: a true identity within the force. One evening, after a long day of training, the officers gathered to discuss Bhawan's future. They had grown attached to him, but now they needed to make a decision. Would Bhawan continue as an unofficial member of the force, or would he be fully accepted into the team? After some discussion, the commander of the SWAT team spoke. "We've all seen what Bhawan is capable of. He has shown courage, discipline, and loyalty. He has earned his place. It's time we make it official." The decision was unanimous. Bhawan would not just be a police dog in training, he would officially become part of the SWAT K9 unit. And with this new status, he needed a name that reflected his importance. The legacy behind the name one of the officers suggested the name Bhawan, inspired by a legendary police dog who had once served in a similar unit. That dog had been a hero, sacrificing his life during an important mission to protect his handler and team. The name carried honor, bravery, and loyalty, qualities that the young pup had already begun to show. "If we name him Bhawan," another officer said, "it will be more than just a name. It will be a legacy, one that he will carry into every mission he undertakes." The team agreed. From that day forward, the little stray was no longer just a rescued dog. He was Bhawan, the police dog. As if sensing the significance of the moment, Bhawan stood taller, wagging his tail but remaining still, as though he understood that something had changed. The officers gave him affectionate pats, welcoming him not just as a trainee, but as one of their own. The first steps of an official police dog. With his new status came new responsibilities. Training intensified, and Bhawan was now expected to perform at the level of a real police dog. His handlers no longer treated him like a stray or a newcomer. Instead, they held him to the same high standards as the other trained canines. One of the first changes was his daily routine. Now, Bhawan had a strict training schedule that included morning obedience drills to reinforce commands like sit, stay, come, and heel. Physical endurance exercises to build his stamina for long patrols and emergency missions. Scent detection practice where he learned to track specific smells and locate hidden objects. Agility training involving jumping over barriers, crawling through tight spaces, and maneuvering quickly through obstacles. Unlike before, when training was mostly exploratory, now every session had a purpose. Bhawan wasn't just learning tricks, he was preparing for real-world scenarios. One of the most critical aspects of his training was meal discipline. In the police force, dogs were trained to understand that food is not just for eating, it is also a tool for training and reward. Every meal became a test of patience. The officers would place a bowl of food in front of Bhawan and give the command, "Wait." Bhawan had to resist eating until given permission. At first, this was difficult for him. He had spent months as a stray, where every meal was uncertain. But over time, he learned to control his instincts. Now, even when placed in front of a delicious meal, he would sit patiently, waiting for his handler's signal. Training. With the team. Bhawan wasn't just training alone. He was now fully integrated into the SWAT K9 team. He participated in group drills, learning how to work in formation with the other dogs. At first, the senior police dogs tested him. They expected him to make mistakes, but Bhawan was quick to learn. He followed commands precisely, matching their pace and staying in sync with the unit. One particularly challenging drill involved simulated high-stress situations. Loud sirens, flashing lights, and multiple distractions were introduced to test the dog's focus. Bhawan had struggled with distractions before, but now he remained calm and composed. He had learned that his handler's voice was the most important sound, and he responded to it without hesitation. A special moment of recognition. After weeks of intense training, something special happened. Bhawan was officially awarded his police badge. During a small ceremony, the commander placed a custom police tag on Bhawan's collar. It bore the name Bhawan and the insignia of the SWAT K-9 unit. "You're one of us now," the commander said, patting Bhawan's head. The officers cheered, and even the senior police dogs gathered around, as if acknowledging his place among them. For Bhawan, this was more than just a ceremony. It was a moment of acceptance, purpose, and belonging. Looking toward the
Bhawan's first advanced training, the path to becoming a true police dog. Now that Bhawan had officially been accepted as a police dog, the real challenge began. He had already mastered basic obedience, agility, and patrol skills, but to truly be an asset to the SWAT K-9 unit, he needed to undergo advanced training. Unlike his previous lessons, these new drills would push him to his physical and mental limits. Bhawan's handlers had high expectations. He had already proven himself to be an intelligent and resilient dog, but now he needed to show that he could handle complex police operations. His next phase of training would focus on three key areas: tactical training and response to commands under extreme pressure, advanced scent detection, including identifying illegal substances and explosives, physical conditioning for real-world missions. Each of these areas would require intense focus, discipline, and endurance. Bhawan's journey was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. Tactical training, learning to react under pressure. Bhawan had already learned to follow basic commands, but police work required instant reactions in unpredictable situations. To test his response under pressure, the officers designed high-stress scenarios for him to navigate. In one drill, Bhawan was placed in a simulated hostage rescue operation. A group of officers acted as suspects, while another officer played the role of a trapped civilian. Bhawan's job was to remain calm and focused while navigating a chaotic environment. The exercise began. The room was filled with loud noises, flashing lights, and moving obstacles, all designed to distract him. Bhawan had to stay by his handler's side, ignoring everything except for his commands. At first, Bhawan was overwhelmed by the intensity. He hesitated when the lights flashed, his ears flicking back at the sudden loud bangs. However, his handler immediately corrected him, using clear and firm commands to bring his focus back. By the third round of the drill, Bhawan had adapted. He learned to tune out the distractions and focus only on his handler's voice. By the end of the session, he had successfully completed his task. He followed his handler through the simulation, identified the suspects, and secured the area without getting distracted. It was an important milestone. Bhawan had demonstrated that even in high-pressure situations, he could stay focused and execute commands flawlessly. Advanced scent detection, the science of the nose. A key skill for police dogs is scent detection. Some dogs specialize in tracking suspects, while others are trained to detect narcotics, explosives, or missing persons. Bhawan had a natural ability to pick up scents, but now his training would become more specialized. His first test involved detecting contraband hidden in various objects. Officers placed several containers in front of him. Some were empty, while others contained controlled substances used for training. Bhawan had to sniff each container and signal when he found the target scent. At first, he was uncertain. He sniffed each container, but didn't seem to understand what was expected of him. However, after being guided by his handler and rewarded when he correctly identified the substance, Bhawan quickly made the connection. Within just a few days, Bhawan was able to identify hidden substances with an accuracy rate of over 90%. But his training didn't stop there. Next, Bhawan was introduced to explosive detection training. This was one of the most dangerous and difficult skills for a police dog to learn. Unlike narcotics detection, explosives posed immediate risks, meaning that Bhawan had to be extremely precise in his signals. His training involved exposure to various explosive compounds in a controlled environment. Bhawan had to detect even the smallest traces of these substances while remaining calm. At first, Bhawan was cautious. He could sense that these scents were different from anything he had encountered before. But as always, he adapted quickly. Within a few weeks, he could confidently identify multiple types of explosives and signal their presence without hesitation. The officers were impressed. Bhawan was showing signs that he could become more than just a patrol dog. He had the potential to be an elite detection dog for the SWAT team. Physical conditioning, the strength to endure any mission. While Bhawan had already gone through agility training, police work required exceptional endurance. Missions often required dogs to run for miles, jump over obstacles, climb ladders, and even swim in dangerous conditions. To prepare him, the officers designed a progressive physical conditioning program that would test Bhawan's stamina, strength, and coordination. Endurance runs. Bhawan was trained to run alongside officers for long distances without slowing down. This built his stamina for extended missions. Obstacle navigation. He practiced jumping over barriers. Bhawan's continued growth, proving himself in real-world training. Bhawan's progress had been remarkable. From a lost stray to a fully trained police dog in the making, his transformation had been nothing short of inspiring. He had overcome physical obstacles, learned to work as part of a team, and mastered the discipline required of a true SWAT K9. But there was still one critical area in which he needed to improve: his reaction time and coordination in high-pressure scenarios. Police dogs must be able to respond instantly to commands without hesitation or error. In real missions, a split-second decision could mean the difference between capturing a suspect or letting them escape. Bhawan had already shown great obedience, but his handlers wanted to push his limits and refine his skills even further. Training for instant reactions. To sharpen Bhawan's reaction time, the officers designed a series of high-speed drills. These exercises were meant to test his ability to process commands instantly while under pressure. Rapid response test. Bhawan had to sprint across an obstacle course while responding to verbal and hand signals. He had to switch directions quickly, stop on command, and restart without hesitation. Multi-command drills. In this drill, Bhawan was given multiple commands in quick succession, forcing him to process instructions rapidly. He had to shift between sitting, lying down, running, and stopping at a moment's notice. Surprise distraction test. Officers introduced unexpected distractions, such as loud noises, moving objects, or fake suspects, to see if Bhawan could stay focused on his commands without getting sidetracked. At first, Bhawan struggled with the speed of the commands. While he obeyed each instruction correctly, his response time was slightly slower than the experienced police dogs. However, after weeks of practice, his reflexes sharpened significantly. By the end of the training period, Bhawan was reacting just as fast as the senior K9s. His handlers were impressed. He was now ready for more advanced police work. Learning to track and detect threats. A major responsibility of a SWAT K9 is locating potential threats, whether it be suspects, explosives, or missing persons. Bhawan had already demonstrated an excellent sense of smell, but his tracking abilities needed further refinement. To enhance his tracking skills, Bhawan was trained in two key areas: human scent tracking. Officers created simulated search and rescue missions, hiding a person in an unknown location. Bhawan had to follow their scent trail and successfully find them. At first, he would get distracted, but as he learned to trust his nose, his accuracy improved. Threat identification. Bhawan was introduced to specialized scent training that allowed him to distinguish between different types of objects, learning to signal when he detected weapons, explosives, or illegal substances. His breakthrough moment came when he successfully tracked a hidden suspect during a training simulation. The officers knew then that Bhawan was one step closer to becoming a fully certified police dog. A test of patience, the final obedience challenge. Bhawan had shown intelligence, speed, and tracking ability. But there was one more crucial test he needed to pass: ultimate obedience and self-control. One of the most advanced police dog exercises is the food test. an extreme challenge that determines whether a dog can resist eating food placed in front of them until given permission. For the test, the officers placed a bowl of food directly in front of Bhawan and gave the command, "Wait." Bhawan's ears perked up. He looked at the bowl, then back at his handler. His tail wagged slightly, but he remained perfectly still. The officers increased the difficulty. They stepped away, leaving Bhawan alone with the food. 30 seconds passed, then a full minute. Bhawan did not move. Finally, after a long pause, the handler gave the command, "Eat." Only then did Bhawan lean forward and take his meal. He had passed the ultimate patience test, proving that he had the discipline and restraint required of a top-level police dog. A look to the future Bhawan was no longer just a stray with potential. He had become one of the best police trainees the team had ever seen. His ability to follow commands, track scents, and perform under pressure had earned him the respect of both his handlers and his fellow police dogs. But this was just the beginning. Soon, he would take on real police missions, where his training would be put to the ultimate test. The once-lost puppy had found his purpose, and now he was ready to serve. Bhawan's transformation. The final steps toward becoming a certified police dog. Bhawan had come a long way from being a small, lost stray who wandered into the police camp. Through months of rigorous training, he had developed into a highly disciplined and skilled police dog, impressing both his handlers and the senior officers. He had proven his obedience, endurance, and tracking abilities, but now he had to pass one final set of challenges before being officially recognized as a fully qualified police K9. Advanced tactical training. Mastering real-world scenarios. To finalize his training, Bhawan had to undergo a series of complex tactical simulations. These exercises were designed to replicate real-life situations, testing whether Bhawan could apply everything he had learned in a high-stakes environment. Obstacle course simulation. The first test involved an advanced obstacle course where Bhawan had to jump over high barriers without hesitation, crawl through tight spaces to simulate entering small areas during a search, balance on narrow beams to improve his coordination, run through moving obstacles without getting distracted. At first, the moving obstacles confused him. The unexpected movement made it harder for him to predict where to go. But with practice, he adapted quickly, learning to rely on his instincts and his handler's commands to navigate efficiently. By the end of the exercise, Bhawan had completed the entire course in record time, showing that he was physically ready for real-world operations. Search and apprehension drill. The second test was more difficult. Bhawan had to track and apprehend a fleeing suspect during a simulated chase. The suspect was a trained officer wearing protective gear, running at full speed to test Bhawan's ability to identify, chase, and subdue a moving target. The moment the officer ran, Bhawan's instincts kicked in. He locked onto the target, sprinting at full speed. Unlike in his early training days, where he would sometimes get distracted, Bhawan was now completely focused on his mission. Within seconds, he closed the distance, executing a perfect takedown maneuver by grabbing the officer's padded arm and holding firm until his handler arrived to issue the release command. This test proved that Bhawan could handle high-pressure situations with confidence and control. He was no longer just a fast learner. He was ready to apply his skills in the field. Social reintegration, returning to the team. While Bhawan had excelled in his solo training, the final part of his qualification process involved reintegrating with the rest of the K9 unit. Police dogs needed to be able to work in teams, responding to commands while remaining in sync with other dogs. At first, the senior dogs watched him carefully, testing whether he could keep up. Bhawan understood that this was a final test of discipline. Instead of competing with them, he followed their lead, moving with precision and responding to commands in perfect timing. By the end of the reintegration process, Bhawan had earned the respect of the entire unit. He was now officially one of them. The moment of certification. After months of intense training, it was time for Bhawan's final evaluation. The officers gathered for a formal assessment where Bhawan had to demonstrate all the skills he had learned. He successfully completed obedience drills without hesitation, scent detection tests, correctly identifying contraband agility challenges, clearing obstacles with precision, controlled suspect apprehension, showcasing restraint and discipline. When the final test was over, the head trainer nodded in approval. Bhawan has passed all requirements. He is now officially a certified police K9. The officers cheered and clapped, and Bhawan's handler knelt beside him, giving him a proud pat on the head. Bhawan, once just a stray looking for a place to belong, had become an official police dog, a valued member of the force. A look to the future. With his certification complete, Bhawan was now ready to take on real missions, patrolling the streets, assisting in search and rescue operations, and protecting his team. His story, once about survival and persistence, had now become one of purpose and honor. And as he looked up at his handler, his tail wagging slightly, it was clear. Bhawan had finally found his true home. Bhawan's legacy. From stray to heroic police dog years had passed since Bhawan first wandered into the police camp as a lost and determined stray. Now, he was no longer just a dog looking for a home. He was a fully certified police K9, serving alongside his team with discipline, courage, and loyalty. Over time, Bhawan had participated in numerous missions, helping to track down missing persons, detect illegal substances, and assist in high-risk operations. His reputation within the force had grown, and he had become an irreplaceable asset to the SWAT team. But his journey wasn't just about training and missions. It was about belonging, proving himself, and making a difference. 4 years of service. A life dedicated to duty. Bhawan had been with the police force for almost 4 years, and in that time, he had saved lives, prevented crimes, and built an unbreakable bond with his fellow officers. Some of his most memorable achievements included tracking a lost child in a dense forest, leading rescuers to the boy just in time, assisting in a major narcotics bust, where his detection skills uncovered hidden contraband that human officers had missed, apprehending a dangerous suspect, preventing a potential threat from escaping. Through it all, Bhawan had remained loyal and fearless, always ready to serve. A symbol of hope and inspiration. Bhawan's story had touched many people. His transformation from a helpless stray to a highly trained police dog became an inspiration for those who believed in second chances. His story was even shared on social media and local news, where people followed his journey with admiration. Many who had once doubted that a stray could become a police dog now saw Bhawan as proof that determination and training could overcome any obstacle. The officers, who had once questioned whether he belonged, now couldn't imagine their team without him. A future secured. As Bhawan continued to serve, the officers knew that one day he would eventually retire. But for now, he was still in his prime, performing his duties with the same energy and passion he had shown since the beginning. The once lost puppy who refused to leave had now found his forever home. He had become more than just a police dog. He was a legend in the making.